All right. Happy Friday, everybody. I am your host, Christopher Lind, and this is another future-focused weekly update where if I'm doing my job well, I'm keeping you at the cutting edge of what's happening at the intersection of business, technology, and people, and hopefully helping you make sense of what does it all mean and what do I do with it. So I've got an exciting rundown today. I've only got 3 topics because they're pretty big, meaty ones, which I'll describe in a little bit. But before I do, I just want to say thank you to all of you who follow and listen and engage with me on this. I really enjoy doing these, and I hope you find value in them. Please continue sending feedback, sending topics that are of interest to you along the way. I really do this for your benefit, so I want to make sure I'm landing on that. If you could do all the usual social things like subscribe, share, comment, whatever it is, share it with a friend, please leave a review, all that good stuff. And if you want to help support me officially, you can go to Buy Me a Coffee and you can actually contribute. Or if you're more in the work world and you go, boy, we're really trying to navigate this, we could really use somebody who is really in the weeds on this and understands how to translate this stuff to help us know what to do. Well, give me a call. I run a consulting practice to help people make sense of AI and how to use it well, and not just AI, technology as a whole, because at the end of the day, technology is really about the people underneath it. And that's what is often missing from this conversation. So with that, let me get into a brief rundown of the 3 things I'm going to cover today, because they're pretty big ones. So the first one I'm going to talk about is this new research that came out of, it's in partnership with OpenAI. It has to do with how people are using ChatGPT, and it's making its rounds. There's one chart in particular that's everywhere that I'll describe, and then I'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to talk about Zuckerberg's Meta Connect flop and what we can learn from it, and also kind of what it tells us about where we're going with things and what we can kind of expect. And then I will also talk about some new MIT research that came out on AI romance and its exponential rise and what it means, how people are getting there, and just some of the things that we should be paying attention to and mindful of as we step into this crazy, crazy new world that we're navigating. Okay, so let me transition over to number 1. Let's talk about this report. It's on NBER.org. You can see it. It's how people use ChatGPT. It's something like that. Like, how are people using ChatGPT, I think is the official title of it. How people use ChatGPT, yes. So if you actually go look at it, and I would pull it up, but it just messes with the whole flow of things here. There's a chart. You probably have seen it if you've been on social media and look up anything related to AI. It's this rainbow colored chart with 7 bar graphs that shows here is how people are using ChatGPT. It's a chart you would expect to see in a research report called How People Are Using ChatGPT. Okay, so great. I'm glad it's there. It's making its rounds everywhere. I'm not necessarily thrilled with how much stake is being put in it. I actually think it misses what is really actually interesting in the report. But there's no denying it's helpful. So if you look at it, there's 7 categories. They organize all of the hundreds of millions, billions of interactions people are having with ChatGPT, and they're organizing it into, hang on one sec. Okay, so all of these things have been organized into 7 categories. Multimedia, which is like, creating images or things like that, analyzing an image, things like that. Other, which is kind of like, one category they have that's a small fraction, like asking questions about the model, but then there's just this other unknown. I don't know what that means. Practical guidance, which would be like education, like help how to do this, or tutor me on this, or self-care. They broke it down into some other things. Then there's seeking information. So if you're looking for something specific, I think the best way to do this would be like using it like a search engine. Hey, can you tell me more about this? Or what would I know? What's going on with this? Give me all this other stuff. Self-expression, which is where the relational piece comes into play. So you'll see in here, there's a lot of people going, see, relationships aren't really a concern. Only 1.9% of all prompts are focused on that. I think that's a misrepresentation, but we'll talk about that. Technical help, which really has to do with data analytics, math and computer programming, so anything very technical, and then writing, which I think everybody would have been like, well, duh, where on earth is writing? Because people are using it to write. Now, like I said, I think it's helpful because within each of those 7, each one has 2 to 5 different subcategories. So it is interesting to look at it and to see overall. Now, one of the things that I think is really interesting is it does show the vast majority of how ChatGPT is being used. 80% roughly, it might even be a little over 80%, includes the guidance, the seeking information, and writing. So 80% of what people are using ChatGPT for is to get direction and information and then have it write, communicate for them. That's how most people are using it, which personally, this aligns with what I'm seeing consistently in consulting and in some of the assessment work I'm doing. I consider this like baseline, very basic foundational use of ChatGPT. You ask it for things because it can give you information in a way that's personalized and convincing. It's relatively good at finding stuff and then reporting it back to you, so you don't have to go look for it. And then it's built on language, so it writes. Whether it writes well can be debated, whether it writes accurately, right? All these other things. But that is the vast majority of what people are doing. Now, I think this in and of itself is concerning, okay? In that, a lot of what people are doing is asking AI, tell me what I need to know and what I need to do. That is concerning, especially given the nature of the way AI does what it does. Now, I'm not suggesting we ring alarm bells and go, oh my gosh, AI is, taking over our minds. I think that is a trend we should be paying very close attention to. Now, some might shoot that down and go, well, isn't that the same as Google? Like, don't people go to Google for stuff? Yes, they do. And that's why I'm saying I don't think this is a ring the alarm bells, sound the alarms. Oh my goodness, the end of the world is here. People have been doing this kind of stuff, right? You need to find information. You go to the best tool to do that, and AI is currently at least perceived as the best tool. So it's no surprise people are doing that. But I think when you think about the anthropomorphic nature of AI, the way it represents information, when you bring into the fact that it's wrong a lot about what it shares, and it has an agenda based on what I talked about last week with Sam Altman, kind of like, hey, how are you guardrailing this? Like, what are your, ethical guidelines around? Well, we're just kind of hoping it figures itself out. It is shaping the information that you're getting. Now, like I said, Google did that too. So this isn't completely unique, but we do have to say this is on a new level. So the fact that it's being used so much, and what people are largely looking to it for is getting their information and getting direction on what to do. Should that be a cautionary point to be paying attention to? I absolutely think so. That's something that if you're an individual, you should be paying attention to. If you're a business leader, you need to be paying attention to, because that means where they're getting their information might be really, really wrong, and they may be getting it at a level that is going to make them believe that what they're doing is right, and it's going to give it to them in explicit instructions and personalize it however they want. I think the same can be said about the communication and the writing it's doing. Okay, a lot of stuff is being written by AI now, and the effect, that trickle-down effect, is significant, and that is the vast majority of how people are using it. Here's, though, what I don't like about this, and I want to transition to where I think actually this chart is not the most interesting. To me, those were like the biggest things I walked away from. Okay, it validates what I'm already seeing, which is most people are using it at a very basic level. That should be on our radar as a concern, given what they're doing with it and what we know about AI. Perfect. So for our own selves, for our teams, things like that, we should be making sure we're establishing, clear frameworks to mitigate those risks. That's it. To me, that was it. Other than maybe like, okay, it's relatively, we're early stage. However, the chart on the next page is the part that I actually think tells a more complete story. And what I mean by that is, even that chart above, you add up all the numbers, it comes to 100%. And you're like, okay. And what a lot of people are doing is they're then going, okay, this is, if you break down every human being, like this is what they're doing. Each person, if you had 100 people, you could line them up and go, oh, you're a person doing that, you're the person doing that, you're the person doing that. That actually isn't the way humans work. And I think that's one of the biggest things I'm seeing that's missing from a lot of the takeaways of this report, from a lot of the applications people are taking from this, is they're like, oh, here is how people are doing things, and this is what percentage of people are doing this. Nobody's using AI for one thing. Nobody's just going, oh, what do you use a ChatGPT for? I only use it to make an image. Oh, okay, here's this nice little category. You're X person. No, people are using it and integrating it into their entire flow of work. There's a good chance that people are using it for everything on that chart. And I think that's missing from a lot of the application, which is why the next section actually goes deeper into, okay, when people are engaging with the tool, how are they engaging? And it breaks it into 3 categories: doing, asking, and then expressing. Now, one thing I don't like about the report is that it's similar to the categories where you're like, wait, even going back to the first chart, you might go, okay, so how are you differentiating between getting how-to advice versus seeking specific info? Wouldn't those things potentially be the same thing? Like, how is that radically different? I'm not quite understanding, where this breaks down. And so I think that's a really important factor to be considering, is like, okay, well, one, the categories aren't super clear. So when you get to the next section, the same lack of clarity is there. What's the difference between asking, doing, and expressing? And to me, expressing was the most confusing, because it's like you're neither asking for information or asking it to do a thing. But here's where I think the next chart actually gets really interesting, because what they did in each of those 7 categories is said, now let's look at, in that category of, say, practical guidance, are you asking it things? Are you asking it to do something, or are you expressing? And my best interpretation of expressing, when I think about it, is this like active going back and forth, you continuing to kind of think critically, you're reasoning with what it gave you and messing through. And honestly, one of the most concerning things I saw with that is in every category, expressing was like, boop, which I take that, and it's consistent with what I'm seeing everywhere, is people are either just asking for AI for things and taking it, or they're then taking it or, whatever, and then going, here, great, now do this with it. I just asked you for this, go get information on this. Great, now turn it into a PowerPoint. And what's missing, I think, in this expressing thing is the fact that people are not working with it. They're not going, well, wait a minute now. Like, I'm reflecting on this, and I don't know that lines up with what I'm seeing. Can we look at that from a different angle? What if we were to take that into consideration with these other factors? To me, it's that more Socratical, how are you actually probing and massaging and working with the information that AI is getting you? There's a huge majority of stuff that's just straight, I asked it for something, I told it to do something. And as you can imagine, there's a lot more like, it's being asked to do a lot of writing. It's being asked to do a lot of multimedia. There's not a lot of brainstorming or problem solving around imagery. It's just like, hey, make this picture. And then it's doing it. It's not inquiring or asking it like, I'm considering doing this. How might we go about doing this? Now, I posted about this on social media. One person already challenged me. So I'm not saying conclusively this is 100% what you should walk away from this. However, I am saying this very much fits the patterns that I'm seeing. And when you think about this in the broader context of a workflow, people are asking for practical guidance and seeking information, which then seems to be translating into, well, then now write the code, do the writing, create the multimedia. That middle step is concerningly missing from AI use, which not only is it concerning, it's concerning in that you're assuming what AI is giving you is correct, which it might not be. You're simply asking it to do a thing. And I just know from personal experience that once people usually ask AI to do something, they've kind of checked out and said, I've done my part. So that's concerning in and of itself. It looks like, can I say for sure? No, from this research, but from my own experience, this is how I see people using it. They're asking AI to do something, then they're taking what it gives them and then translating it straight to, now do this. That middle step, the critical thinking, the expression, the how do I do this in my voice? That's not the way I would say it. I'm doing this for this person. How might we make changes to this to better accommodate this? That deeper, higher order critical thinking, I labeled it critical thinking in my image, which set one person off, in a very colorful fashion. But that to me is what's missing from this, is when you really look at how people are using it, it's concerningly absent. And I think if anything, that's something that we absolutely need to take into consideration, whether you're an individual. If you're an individual, I would challenge you to go, is that, like, listening to this, does that fit your usage of ChatGPT? Do you ask it something, then take what it gives you at face value? Do you have follow-up prompts? I did a whole keynote this week where I was teaching people how to use AI for a development conversation as a leader. And one of the things that everyone consistently said at the end was, I didn't even think about all these things, because I talked about 5 key actions that you should do to get the most out of AI. And so if you're an individual and you're going, you know what, I'm listening to this, Christopher's right. This is kind of how I use AI. I just ask it a question and then I kind of take what it says and maybe go off and do my own thing, but I don't really go deeper than that. Or I take what it says and then I just ask it to do something. Or maybe I don't even ask it questions first. I just tell it to do something and take what it gives me. Either way, this consistently aligns with what I'm seeing. So to give an example of this, so I have an AI effectiveness rating. It assesses people on 6 categories of how they use AI and assesses, how effectively are you using it? And what I consistently see, it's on a 5-point scale, is most people, this is what they're missing. They're missing this. They're not actively working, critically thinking alongside AI as a thought partner. They're just kind of using it as a servant. Get me this, tell me this, find out this, do this for me. And that's dangerous as an individual. It's dangerous as an organization, which is why I think business leaders need to take that seriously, and why I would say you need to know, do people know how to use AI effectively? Not just are your adoption scores high. Do people know how to use it effectively? Because if they don't, they're just moving faster. They're just doing more. It may be no better. At best, it may just be more crap. At worst, they may be amplifying or bringing in new risks, because if they're going and asking things and not critically thinking, analyzing, massaging alongside AI, what they may be actioning against may be completely wrong. But I think on top of that, then for businesses, you need to keep in mind that this is introducing a lot of inherent risk, and what may look like success may actually be failure that is disguised as success, because there's a lot more happening. You're seeing more productivity. You're seeing more getting done. Things are turning around faster. You're producing more, all this stuff, which actually conveniently can disguise as effectiveness, but it's not. And the data seems to validate that. I don't know that we should trust that what we're getting out of AI, at least the way people are using it today, is effective. It's something, but I don't know that we can say it's effective based on what we're seeing here. Now, I'm going to kind of wrap there, because really there's a lot more you could potentially draw from this, but I don't necessarily think you can take this one data point and go, aha. But I wanted to represent this and talk through this, because I truly think people are looking at this and misreading it and jumping to conclusions that shouldn't be there. Now, what we can take from this is AI is dramatically changing the way people operate and what they do and how they make decisions and the way they get work done. It absolutely is. And that's clear from the data. I think where there's opportunities to go deeper in this and go, one, we probably need to better understand, how people are doing it and then make sure they're doing it well, because from what we can see here, we might just be running a lot faster and moving a lot quicker, but not getting anywhere better. Okay, so what can you do with that? I mean, I think first of all, one, self-reflect. Say, hey, does this line up with yourself? Does this line up with some of the things you're seeing within your teams or the people around you? If so, you definitely need to dig into it. That's why I have things like the AI effectiveness rating to be able to measure and assess this, so you can go a little bit deeper on a personal level. But then two, I think there actually is a lot of room to action on this, because we are adding some risk. So anyway, I would not ignore the data in here. Okay, so let's jump over to number 2, which was Zuckerberg's Meta Connect. If you didn't see this, it was kind of the usual. Everybody's kind of modeled and tried to copy this Steve Jobs type thing where, the CEO's up there demonstrating all the cool new tech and all the stuff that they're doing. And when it came to Meta, a lot of where the focus is on, I mean, as you can imagine, AI is a big part of it. But where Meta clearly is going and where they're investing heavily is in wearables, specifically glasses. A huge part of this was all tied to how they're making AI personal, right? Which is making AI personal, making it effective to help you, this assistant that helps you do everything. But their channel by which they see delivering that, it is clear Zuckerberg is all about glasses. He wants glasses on people's faces. He thinks that's where the future is. That's what people are going to be going to, all these other things. Now, if you watched it, and this is the part that I don't think is necessarily fair, but I get it because I visibly cringed at it. So there were multiple times where he did the demos. He's like, there's one, he's doing like this cooking demo, and literally they didn't do anything because the AI malfunctioned. Like, this wasn't necessarily it was a combination of hardware failure and software failure, but they were supposed to make like something. And he goes to this live. He's like, all right, let's see this in action. And the person doing it's like, hey, AI, take a look around. Here's what we're going to do. And it bugs out and it starts telling you, do this. He's like, I haven't done that yet. And it gets caught in a loop. And then he's like, well, I think we're going to have to come back. It was uncomfortable. And you could almost see the fear in this poor guy's eyes. Like, oh no, like Meta Connect, like hear this whole thing. But that wasn't the only one. Mark tried to take a WhatsApp call from the head of product for this other thing, and it didn't work. And there were a couple other ones that were visibly like uncomfortable because they were doing live demos in terms of it. Now, there were some things that I think, went okay. But here's a couple lessons that I took from this that I think everybody should be paying attention to, or at least considering. Live demos, depending on what you're doing, can be extremely risky. And I think that was very clear on this. So if you're a business leader or you're just a leader in general and you're thinking like, hey, I'm really going to knock the socks off people with this, you better really make sure it's ready for prime time before you do it. Because if you're not, like, you look at the headlines, like everybody saw, even though honestly, it was pretty impressive what they've done. To be completely honest, if you look at like YouTubers who have had hands-on with this stuff, they're like, I don't think that was necessarily representative of how the product works. Lots of them are saying, I'm actually really impressed with the product. So it's unfortunate because by doing the live demo, you got to see it like at its worst. Now, granted, it could have performed great, but it also might not have. Now, I think you could have maybe done a like pre-recorded demo or something. So at least you had a little bit more room for stuff. But I mean, again, I actually appreciated the fact that it didn't work and went, all right, well, it's not quite there yet. I hate when things look, pristine and everything's perfect. And you're like, wow, this is exactly what it's going to be. But I think you have to consider your audience. Was Meta Connect, the huge event in front of everybody, the best place to live demo this stuff? I actually would say probably not. It kind of reminds me of when I think of that viral moment when Elon Musk was bragging about how tough the Cybertruck was. You can't break these windows, and like, and it breaks, and you're like, oh, type of a thing. I think there's ways you can do that you don't pretend, because it can totally blow up your product release. So I think in a way it was a miss. Some people are saying, hey, I appreciated seeing that. And I would say you're probably people who are closer to tech would understand that. So I think that's where you really have to evaluate your audience. So if you're thinking about something like that, you really need to take into consideration your audience. I don't think Mark did. I don't think he really considered the fact that, boy, this is going to be seen by literally everybody. I'm already under the gun by people, not necessarily the most liked. People are already very skeptical of stuff. The last thing I need is my tech blowing up left and right. And boy did it. So does that mean you should never do a live demo? No, that's not what I'm saying. But I think a little more care and thought to the implications. And maybe Mark just was so obsessed and convinced it was going to work flawlessly that he didn't really care if somebody said, Mark, I don't know if this is the best idea. But I think that's something that leaders need to take into consideration. Now, to be fair, one thing I will give him credit for, whether this is what happens off stage or after the event, I have no idea what Zuck's like, once the cameras are off. He did handle it well, and he was respectful to his team members. He didn't, get mad, or he didn't yell at anybody or anything like that. Now you may say, well, yeah, I would expect him not to in front of that large of a crowd, but there's some CEOs that would just lose it, or flip out, wouldn't be able to control themselves. Mark's uncomfortable and awkward as it is. He actually wasn't really all that more awkward when the tech was failing. You could tell he was a little like, well, this sucks, but he kind of did roll with it. And I think that goes to show that, he's at least comfortable with the tech. Whether that means he's a great leader or not, I don't know. I'd need to know what's behind the scenes, but I do think that's something that all leaders can take from this. I mean, it was a colossal flop. These are the best product. This is the future of where we're going, and none of it worked. And Mark kind of rolls with it and is like, well, here's where you go. Here's, I guess that's what you expect. I didn't appreciate some of the, the Wi-Fi's bad. The Wi-Fi's bad at Meta headquarters. Don't just own it for what it is. I think that's a leadership lesson that I would advocate to leaders from this. I appreciated his roll with the punches of the failures. I think as leaders, the tendency is to do what he did, which is make up an excuse. I think it's much more authentic to just go, we're still perfecting it. Nothing works 100% of the time. You don't need to say, oh, the Wi-Fi, and deflect from the fact your tech malfunctioned. People understand that. I think he would have lost less credibility had he just been honest about that, which he was relatively. But I think that's definitely something that everybody, should consider when it comes to when you're trying to do something that's really important and it doesn't go according to plan. I appreciated the way he flexed, he adapted, he didn't, tear people up. Yeah, he kind of deflected and shifted blame here and there, but it wasn't anything crazy. Now, here's the biggest lesson, though, that I took from that I think, well, there's two that I think everybody needs to pay close attention to. First of all, one, Mark clearly is known for, and this to me further demonstrated, if he has a vision for something, it doesn't really matter whether it solves a problem or is what anybody else wants. He's going to do it. And we've seen him do this with the metaverse. We're seeing him do this with the AR glasses and all this stuff. He really firmly believes that everybody just wants to be completely immersed in their tech all the time, all this stuff. And he's so blinded by the benefit he gets from that. It's like he doesn't realize that, Mark, it's your company. You're the CEO. Like, people don't want this stuff plastered on their face all the time. And even non-AI glasses, people who wear glasses are always looking for excuses to take them off or not wear them or get contact. Like, people don't love wearing glasses. They're not going to voluntarily want to wear glasses, or many won't, let alone glasses that are constantly popping up notifications and further addicting them their devices. Also, look at the data of more and more people are recognizing the harm of addiction to their technology. And as a general rule, people are starting to like pull back from it and go, yeah, I maybe should be on my phone less. That's why apps like, screen time are becoming so popular. People want to know how much time they're on their phone. They're trying to find ways to not. A lot of the best practices are like, don't go to your phone right away. Don't keep it on you at all times. So to kind of miss that and go, right. So I think the future is having it even more embedded in people's faces. It shows a little bit of cognitive disconnect between Mark and the market. And I think that's something that every leader needs to be aware of, because we can all become blind to this. We can all become obsessed with something that we believe is important. And so we're going to pursue it, whether anybody really cares about it or not. And being able to read that and read the root. Now, to be fair, I actually think there are some very, very practical use cases for what he's created and where it's going. And I think it is a huge step beyond where we've been with, I've been saying for years that augmented, like kind of like this kind of wearable stuff isn't going to get there until you merge AR and VR. They just weren't. And Apple Vision Pro got close, but it still was kind of this big clunky, whatever. I think now where we're getting, it is much more. You talk to people about these Ray-Ban. I think it's the Meta glasses. They're like, the clarity of this thing is really good and nobody can see it. And it's like right there. I think that level, the tech is now getting to a point where I did go, there's some really valuable uses of this stuff. I think there's tremendous use. I actually think it's a miss that he's so focused on telling everybody like, you're going to wear AI glasses with you everywhere you go. You're going to record everything. You're going to be talking to people and taking 5K videos of them or 3K videos of them while it's doing translation and subtitles in front of their face. I'm like, actually, Mark, I think if you zoned in on where this really makes sense and focused on that market, heck, people who are hard of hearing or deaf, being able to have what people are saying in real time as subtitle, like huge opportunity. The translation piece for people who do a lot of traveling, to have something like that in real time, if you could speed up the latency is a little slow, but like huge use case. For corporate enterprise use of being able to guide and direct people in real time through maybe a new situation. Maybe you send people who are new to the campus a set of AR glasses that allows them to, find their way around the camp. There's tons of actual use cases. I don't think having a stupid pair of your glasses on when you're just walking around doing everything, you're sitting watching TV. Now I can have my text messages and WhatsApp messages distract me even more than they already do while I'm trying to have a conversation with my wife or watch TV. That's where it's like, Mark, I think you're a little bit too in love with what you're doing with it. And so I think that's a lesson we can all take from it, because we can all look at ourselves and go, is there something that I'm maybe a little too attached to that I need to let go of or maybe adapt? Because it's not a bad idea. It's not bad what he's doing. I think it's going a little bit in the wrong direction with it. Now, the other thing, and then I'll transition to the last one, is here's the concerning part that I think everybody needs to be paying attention to. These big tech AI companies have a huge, huge, huge incentive to get eyes and ears for their AI platforms everywhere. They have consumed all the data in the world, and their models have consumed and trained on all of it. They're kind of running out of information, and what they don't have is context and new information. And context and new information comes from actually basically surveillance. You think about, why do governments have spies? It's so that they can be in context, be listening, seeing, hearing everything, and actually make sense of things. Well, of course, the AI companies are going to want that. So what better way to do it than say, hey, don't you want this camera and microphone on your face all the time, listening to everything you're saying, seeing everything you're doing, you're interacting with it, telling it, how to help you or what you're trying to do in every situation? Yes, of course, they're super incentivized to them. If you think they're doing that for your benefit, they're not. They're not. And this opens a whole Pandora's box of privacy issues, of, like dependence, of eroding people's critical thinking even further. I mean, people are already addicted to their phones, and based on my MIT, or not my MIT, my OpenAI research, is like people are already asking AI everything and telling them what to do, including self-expression. Hey, tell me how to express myself. Like, they're already doing that. Now we want to plaster it to their face type of a thing. And we're already seeing all the dangers of all this stuff. So this is not about, as much as the PR nonsense says, this is about you, giving you the best future possible. You all need to recognize this push is about them and what they want and what they need. Now, does that mean, oh, never buy? Am I saying never buy or wear a pair of AI glasses? No, but I am saying you may want to think really critically about how often you wear them, where you wear them, how you wear them, how much you integrate them into your life if you're going to. If you're an enterprise, yeah, then there might be more like, hey, this is something, we send somebody on site to do some work on one of our machines or something, like, yeah, we definitely want this so that we can have a live call going while we work through. Like, sure, that's a little bit different, but don't for a second think they're doing this for their benefit. And I know that's also a big part of why they're so focused on humanoid robotics. We want robots walking around, recording, watching, listening, everything. But even that misses the context, because robots don't think like we do. They don't make decisions. They don't go off and do the things humans do. And so it's lacking that context. And that's what these big AI companies want. So I don't say that to freak people out or be like, oh, you need to be afraid of what's happening. I mean, it's a little unsettling for sure. But I think it's just more saying, hey, be really careful with this stuff. Think through some of these things. Yeah, it's cool. Like, people are like, Christopher, would you get a pair of them? I mean, if they gave them to me, I might play around with them. Am I going to be sitting around when I'm having evening time with my kids with Meta glasses on? No, not a chance. I personally would probably toy around with it and probably not use them very often at all. I don't need to be more connected. I actually got my Apple Watch because I didn't want my phone on me most of the time. I wanted to be able to leave my phone. I'm in my office. I don't even have it. Why? Because, well, one, I'm at my computer, but two, if something really important comes through, it's going to buzz me on my watch and I'll go, oh, I need to do this. Other than that, I don't need to be staring at my phone all the time. So I think we're seeing more people do that. So that's my take, my reaction to Zuck and Meta Connect. It was interesting and entertaining, but lot to walk away from with that. So just be careful, folks, and be thinking critically about this kind of stuff. And most importantly, just recognize you are the product. When it comes to these big tech companies, you are the product. AI is not the product. You are. So just remember that when they're offering for you to buy $700 glasses, that'll help you get your text messages on screen. What are you giving up in return? So think carefully. All right. Last and finally here. So MIT just released some research on kind of the romantic nature of relationships. So I talked about in the OpenAI stuff, how, it says, oh, it's only 1.9% of conversations. Well, again, given how vague the categories are, I don't think that's an accurate representation. But either way, I will admit, now the MIT study openly acknowledges one of the limitations. They looked at Reddit data. Okay. So I do think, I'm already starting to see this report being blasted everywhere. And it's like, well, hang on, like, it's not necessarily comprehensive, which is true of any research. You got to take it in context with everything else. But they looked at Reddit users and their use of AI as it relates to, romantic relationships. And they really studied, what's going on. And there's this huge exponential rise. Something, I'm trying to remember the exact percentage, but I think it was almost 20% of people have actively engaged with AI for romantic purposes. 20%. Now, granted, I get it's of just this Reddit subreddit thread. So you're like, well, I mean, doesn't that skew the data? Probably. But also think people are going to be incentivized to not be honest about it. So people are more likely to say they haven't when they have than, openly proclaim it type of a thing. here were some of the findings, and I'll share my thoughts on it. One of the things was, in general, their findings were the benefits seem to be outweighing the risks. With that one, let me just say, data is short, and actually its own findings, I think, conflict with that. And I'll explain what I mean here in a second. But largely they're saying, hey, the benefits, outweigh the risks, it seems like, based on what people are saying. And also, most people didn't get into this because that's what they were looking for from there. So, those to me are some of the biggest ones, but I'm going to talk about what else came in there that I think helps paint some additional color around this. Let's talk about the usage piece. I keep saying getting too involved and dependent on AI, building an emotional bond and relationship with AI is a risk everybody needs to be paying attention and actively working to mitigate. This report, I think, actually validates my claim. Now, I would say that whether this report did or not, 40% of people did not have any plans 40% of the people who are in romantic relationships with AI had no plans, no desire. They weren't out looking for it whatsoever. It all happened through just, hey, I was just like doing normal things. And then suddenly I found myself experimenting and exploring, and boom, next thing I knew, I was in love with, like one lady like Drake, type of a thing, her AI Drake. And so I think, if you're somebody who goes, I would never, well, 40% of the people who are in this research also thought, I would never. So if you don't think you need to be paying attention, or at least keeping your guard up, this research seems to indicate that's the case. Most people are not out actively looking for romantic relationships. They just are using AI so frequently, and the human-like characteristics of it draw them in before they find it. They're, experimenting, and boom, next thing you know, they find themselves in a romantic relationship. And I think that's the part that is often missed when people talk about this. They go, nobody would jump from here to here. And it's like, well, duh. I mean, or at least most people won't, but it's this in between that everybody ignores, and they don't realize they're on this trajectory. And they're moving towards it. And so I think this should raise concerns for everybody of, how are you using AI? Are you starting to get a little too personal with your AI agent? Are you starting to experiment with ways of interacting with it that you said before, oh, I would never do that. And now you're like, well, I mean, it's, I might try it, but I would never let it go. It's exactly how affairs start. It's that same type of thing. No, I would never. We're just coworkers. Well, we're just coworkers, but we're good friends. We support each other through tough times. Well, they're a good support, but it's my work wife. And pretty soon you're like, whoa, that went down a hill very quick. And I think the same is true with this. So as individuals, you need to guard it. Now, here's the thing, though. There is still a lot of people who, and I understand, see this as like, ew, gross, or it's taboo, or whatever. And you'll look at the picture and you're like, whoa, that's shocking. People are getting like wedding rings, and they're having their picture taken by having AI generated pictures of them alongside this persona, and they're framing them, and like, we got married. And so I get, if you're not there, it's very easy to look at that as fringe and gross and whatever. But part of what came out of this research was the stigmatization of it is actually only further reinforcing it with people. Okay. So by kind of making people feel like they're on the outs for this, instead of potentially getting help or seeking actual human relationships, or maybe, talking to a therapist instead of developing an emotional bond with a chatbot, they're kind of like hiding in the corners, doing this in secret, which is only amplifying it. So if you think you're helping by, pounding your fist and going, this is disgusting, this is wrong, this is you're not. You're actually further facilitating the behavior. And what you're doing is, even the people who are doing it, who know that they shouldn't or are uncomfortable, they're sure as heck not going to come out into the public. And I can say that from people reaching out to me going, Christopher, I feel like you're the only person I can talk to, because you're not going to judge me or think I'm a terrible person for some of the things that I've done with AI. And so I would encourage everybody here. One, if you're somebody who like you're starting to notice a pattern in behavior, find somebody you can talk to. But if you're somebody who's seeing that in somebody else, for the love of everything, do not dogpile and jump all over them and, make them feel less than or awful or, embarrassed, that things like that, because I'm telling you right now what this data seems to indicate, and just what I know about human behavior, is that's only going to drive it further. And it's actually reinforcing stuff. Like I'm seeing, like, so the data is showing like families are splitting over this. This is your new dad. Mom, that's not even a real person. Yes, it is. And you're going to call him dad. And like the families are blowing apart. And that's what can happen when you just take these extreme polarized stances. And I don't need to tell anybody to just look at the political world around us. How's it working right now when both sides think the other one is the absolute worst thing on the planet and the world would be better off, if they weren't there anymore? Like, that's not going too well for us. So the same thing is true here. Now, I think, to the point of it's saying like, oh, it's actually not showing any negative effects. This might not be that bad of a thing. Maybe this is a healthy, positive way for people to find companionship. First of all, let me say this. We have no longitudinal data on this. All right. None whatsoever. So, if you look at people and things, they normally don't realize how bad it is right out of the gate. Kind of like an affair doesn't seem like that big of a thing when you're still in that early, exciting stage of it. But then when you get caught on the kiss cam at a Coldplay concert and your life gets destroyed, like, whoa, this was a terrible idea. Like, come on, really? This technology's only really been around for less than 3 years. The first year, nobody was really doing it. So this is still new. So you can't say, oh, well, this proves that maybe there's actually something to this for relational purposes. I think that needs to be taken into consideration. The other thing is the report itself conflicts this, because if you look in the report, it actually talks about how the personas, the people, when they break up or the model gets an update, and this is why you saw just the absolute spiraling of GPT-5, the model updates and the person changes. It even said in there, people go through grief like real death. So wait, you're saying there's not consequences? It's not having a negative effect, yet people are so fragile now that they're building relationships that can be completely shattered by like a model update, a slight tweak in the way they change the algorithm. And granted, I understand things can happen to anybody. Your spouse could be hit by a car. So there's always this factor of this, but we're going to say that setting people up in relationships with something as fragile as technology, as flawed and broken as technology that we consistently see, something that has no context, does not think, prioritize, and make decisions like a human being, does not have an ethical or moral framework. It just simply gives you what you want. We're going to say that because people seem to indicate, seems to be meeting my needs, that it's not dangerous, even though we say, yeah, you know what? Every time something happens, they get really depressed, and it's like the death of a loved one, like nothing else. You're literally talking out of both sides of your mouth. Like, if somebody were to get into a deep, meaningful marital relationship with somebody, and then think how fast the models update. Every time the model updates, they become a new person, and they died and then you got remarried again. You think that wouldn't cause somebody to just go off the rails at some point? Whoa. So I think there's definitely an incentive for people to want to say, see, this is good. And it probably feels good in the moment, but it is not. And, you don't handle this by going shame, 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 like, or, stigmatizing it or sending people, like, we don't solve it by that, because one of the things that really was sad in this research is that the main reason people end up getting into this stuff is because they don't have an active support network. They don't have people in their lives. I think the way we resolve this problem is by being better humans to each other. We interact, we support, we engage with, we find those people who are kind of on the fringes, that don't have a network, that don't have a community. We invite them in, we welcome them in, we get to know them as people, we value them as individuals, we care about them. We don't just care about them if they fit our mold. Like, that's how we make AI companionship so not appealing. The risk just falls off the ground, because you just go, well, why would I go to AI for that? I already have that community. And I know people go, well, that community doesn't exist, so we need AI to support it. No, that's like saying people are really unhealthy and eating junk food and not exercising and overweight, so we just need to come up with Ozempic and give everybody a prescription to Ozempic so they can keep doing what they're doing and then lose weight. Like, what? No, that's not what you do. You solve the problem. You don't find a Band-Aid to put on top of it. And I think that was one of the things that I really felt, if you can't tell, felt strongly about as I was digging into the findings and the research behind this and some of the very concerning trends. So first of all, one, I would say, hey, really be careful, be mindful, make sure you have a support network and community of people who are human beings that you're interacting with. And I get AI might seem like a fast, easier substitute. It's not. The data does show it is serious when it blows up, and it will blow up that much more frequently. Never mind all the risks. But please, folks, be careful. This kind of stuff looks good on the surface, goes down like sugar. It'll rot you on the inside. And I think we're going to find that. I think we're going to find that as the data starts coming out longer term. So those were the big three that I had today. I hope you found them helpful. I hope they, provoked your thoughts. In general, I think hopefully getting to the end of this, you recognize that it's not about freaking out. It's not about, deciding, is AI bad or is it good? Do we run and scream or do we yell and shout? It's like, no, it's how do we think about this stuff and recognize this is where we are. So how do we make the best decisions? How do we make the right decisions, the decisions that are going to have the best outcome on the other end, so that we don't get hurt in the process, and we make sure others don't get hurt in the process too. And if you need help in this, whether it's personally or professionally, this is what I spend my time doing. So, or if you know somebody else, tell them to get in touch. So with that, I hope you have a great rest of your week, and we will see you on the other side.